Part 3 of Part 5th of Trilby. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jersey City Frankie. Trilby by George du Maurier. Part 5th, Part 3. Then there was a violin solo by young Joachim, then as now the greatest violinist of his time, and a solo on the pianoforte by Madame Schumann, his only peeress, and these came as a wholesome check to the levity of those for whom all music is but an agreeable pastime, a mere emotional delight, in which the intellect has no part, and also as a well-deserved humiliation to all virtuosi who play so charmingly that they make their listeners forget the master who invented the music in the lesser master who interprets it. For these two men and women, the highest of their kind, never let you forget it was Sebastian Bach they were playing in absolute perfection, an absolute forgetfulness of themselves, so that if you weren't up to Bach, you didn't have a very good time. But if you were, or wished it to be understood, or thought you were, you seized your opportunity, and you scored. And by the earnestness of your rapt and tranced immobility, and the stony, Gorgon-like intensity of your gaze, you rebuked the frivolous, as you had rebuked them before by the listlessness and carelessness of your bored resignation to the Signorina Patti's trills and Favourite erreurs, or Monsieur Roquelet's pretty little French mannerisms. And what added so much to the charm of this delightful concert was that the guests were not packed together sardine-wise, as they are at most concerts. They were comparatively few and well chosen, and could get up and walk about and talk to their friends between the pieces, and wander off into other rooms and look at endless beautiful things, and stroll in the lovely grounds by moon or star or Chinese lantern light. And there the frivolous could sit and chat and laugh and flirt when Bach was being played inside, and the earnest wander up and down together in soul communion, through darkened walks and groves and alleys where the sound of French or Italian warblings could not reach them, and talk in earnest tones of the great Zola, or Guy de Maupassant, and Pierre Loti, and exult in beautiful English over the inferiority of English literature, English art, English music, and English everything else. For these high-minded ones who can only bear the sight of classical pictures and the sound of classical music do not necessarily read classical books in any language. No Shakespeares or Dantes or Molières or Goethes for them. They know a trick worth two of that. And the mere fact that these three immortal French writers of light books I have just named had never been heard of at this particular period doesn't very much matter. They had cognate predecessors whose names I happen to forget. Any stick will do to beat a dog with, and history is always repeating itself. Fadio, or Flaubert, let us say, or for those who don't know French and cultivate an innocent mind, Miss Austen, for to be dead and buried is almost as good as to be French and immortal, and Sebastian Bach, and Sandro Botticelli. That all the arts should be represented. These names are rather discrepant, but they make very good sticks for dog beating, and with a thorough knowledge and appreciation of these, or the semblance thereof, you were well equipped in those days to hold your own among the elect of intellectual London circles, and snub the Philistine to rights. Then, very late, a tall, good-looking, swarthy foreigner came in, with a roll of music in his hands, and his entrance made quite a stir. You heard all around, "Here's Glorioli," or "Ecco Glorioli," or "Voici Glorioli," till Glorioli got on your nerves. And beautiful ladies, ambassadoresses, female celebrities of all kinds, fluttered up to him, and beautiful ladies, ambassadresses, female celebrities of all kinds, fluttered up to him and cajoled and fawned, as Svengali would have said, "Prinzessin, Countessin, serene English Altessin," and they soon forgot their highness and their serenity. For with very little pressing, Glorioli stood up on the platform, with his accompanist by his side at the piano, and in his hands a sheet of music at which he never looked. He looked at the beautiful ladies, and ogled and smiled, and from his scarcely parted, moist, thick, bearded lips, which he always licked before singing, there issued the most ravishing sounds that had ever been heard from the throat of man or woman or boy. He could sing both high and low, and soft and loud, and the frivolous were bewitched, as was only to be expected, but even the earnestness of all caught, surprised, rapt, astounded, shaken, tickled, teased, harrowed, tortured, tantalized, aggravated, seduced, demoralized, degraded, corrupted into mere naturalness, forgot to dissemble their delight. And Sebastian Bach, the especially adored of all really great musicians, and also, alas, of many priggish outsiders who don't know a single note and can't remember a single tune, was well forgotten for the night, and who were more enthusiastic than the two great players who had been playing Bach that evening? For these, at all events, were broad and catholic and sincere, and knew what was beautiful, whatever its kind. It was but a simple little song that Glorioli sang, as light and pretty as it could well be, almost worthy of the words it was written to. And the words are de Musset's, and I love them so much I cannot resist the temptation of setting them down here, for the mere sensuous delight of writing them, as though I had just composed them myself. Bonjour, Suzanne, mes fleurs de tes bois, et tu toujours la plus jolie, reviens tel que tu ne vois, d'un grand voyage dans Italie. Du paradis j'ai fait des vers, j'ai fait l'amour, mais tant importe, je passe devant ta maison. Ouvre ta porte, bonjour Suzanne. J'ai vu temps de l'aile, tes corps jolis venir et que tu dis. Je ne viens pas, qu'au encore, quest fuite depuis mon départ. Qui part trop tôt, revient trop tard, mais que importe, je passe devant ta maison, ouvre ta porte, bonjour Suzanne. And when it began, and while it lasted, and after it was over, one felt really sorry for all the other singers. And nobody sang any more that night, for Glorioli was tired, and wouldn't sing again, and none were bold enough to, or disinterested enough to sing after him. Some of my readers may remember that meteoric bird of song, who, though a mere amateur, would condescend to sing for 100 guineas in the saloons of the great, as Monsieur Jourdan sold cloth, who would sing still better for love and glory in the studios of his friends. For Glorioli, the biggest, handsomest, and most distinguished-looking Jew that ever was one of the Sephardim, one of the Seraphim, hailed from Spain, where he was junior partner in the great firm of Morales, Pareles, Gonzalez, and Glorioli, wine merchants, Malaga. He traveled for his own firm. His wine was good, and he sold much of it in England, but his voice would bring him far more gold in the month he spent here. For his wines have been equalled, if it be not libelous to say so, but there was no voice like his anywhere in the world, and no more finished singer. Anyhow, his voice got into little Billy's head more than any wine, and the boy could talk of nothing else for days and weeks, and was so exuberant in his expressions of delight and gratitude that the great singer took a real fancy to him, especially when he was told that this fervent boyish admirer was one of the greatest of English painters, and, as a mark of his esteem, privately confided to him after supper that every century 2 human nightingales were born, only 2, a male and a female, and that he, Glorioli, was the representative male Rossignol of this soi-disant de Nivon Sicile. I can well believe that, and the female, your mate, that should be le Rossignol, if there is such a word, inquired little Billy. Ah, mon ami, it was Alboni, till la petite Adeline Patti came out a year or 2 ago, and now it is la Svengali. La Svengali! Oui, mon fait, you will hear her some day. Et oui, moi, en dirais de nouvelles. Why, you don't mean to say that she's got a better voice than Madame Alboni? Mon ami, an apple is an excellent thing, until you have tried a peach. Her voice to that of Alboni is as a peach to an apple. I give you my word of honor. But, bah, the voice is a detail. It's what she does with it. It's incredible. It gives one cold all down the back. It drives you mad. It makes you weep hot tears by the spoonful. Ah, the tear, mon fait, tenez, I can draw everything but that. Qu'nez pas d'un me coudé. I can only madden with love, but la Svengali. And then, in the middle of it all, prrrt, she makes you laugh. Ah, la bourrière! Fit rire avec des larmes plein les yeux. Voilà qui me pas. Mon ami, when I heard her, it made me swear that even I would never try to sing any more. It seemed too absurd. And I kept my word for a month, at least. And you know, je sais que quoi de moi. You are talking of La Svengali, I bet, said Signor Spartia. Oui, parbleu, you have heard her? Yes, at Vienna last winter, rejoined the greatest singing master in the world. Jeanne Suivot, hélas, I thought I could teach a woman how to sing, till I heard that blackguard Svengali's pupil. He has married her, they say? That blackguard Svengali? Exclaimed little Billy. Why, that must be a Svengali I knew in Paris, a famous pianist, a friend of mine. That's the man. Also unfamous crapule, sauve vos respect. His real name is Adler. His mother was a Polish singer, and he was a pupil at Leipzig Conservatorio. But he's an immense artist, and a great singing master. To teach a woman like that, and such a woman, belle comme un homme, mais belle comme un pot. I tried to talk to her. All she can say is jawohl, or dosh, or nein, or so. Not a word of English, or French, or Italian, though she sings them, oh, but divinely. It is bel canto come back to the world after 100 years. But what voice is it? Asked little Billy. Every voice a mortal woman can have, 3 octaves, 4, and of such a quality that people who can't tell one tune from another cry with pleasure at the mere sound of it directly they hear her, just like anybody else. Everything that Paganini could do with his violin, she does with her voice, only better. And what a voice! Un vrai Bram! Now, I don't mind petting that you are speaking of La Svengali, said Herr Kreutzer, the famous composer, joining in. Quelle merveille, hin! I heard her at St. Petersburg, at the winter ballet. The women all went mad, and pulled off their beryls and tiaments, and kissed them to her, went down on their knees, and cried, and kissed her hands. She did not say one word. She did not even smile. The men sniffled in the corners and looked at the pictures, and dissembled. Often I, Johann Kreutzer, even the Emperor. You're joking, said little Billy. My friend, I never joke when I talk about the singing. You will hear her some day yourself, and you will agree with me that there are 2 classes of people who sing. In the one class, les Svengali. In the other, all the other singers. And does she sing good music? I don't know. All music is good when she sings it. I forget the song. I can only think of her singer. Any good singer can sing a beautiful song, and give pleasure, I suppose. But I would sooner hear La Svengali sing a scale than anybody else sing the most beautiful song in the world, even of my own. That is perhaps how sung the great Italian singers of the last century. It was a lost art, and she has found it, and she must have begun to sing before she began to speak, or else she would not have had the time to learn all that she knows, for she is not yet 30. She sings in Paris in October, Gott sei Dank, and comes here after Christmas to sing to Drury Lane. Julian gives her 10,000 pounds. I wonder now, why, that must be the woman I heard at Warsaw 2 years ago, or 3, said young Lord Widow. It was at Count Silkdosh's. He'd heard her sing in the streets with a tall black-bearded ruffian who accompanied her on a guitar, and a little fiddling gypsy fellow. She was a handsome woman with hair down to her knees, but stupid as an owl. She sang at Silzox, and all the fellows went mad, and gave her their watches and diamond studs and gold scarf pins. By God, I never heard or saw anything like it. I don't know much about music myself. Couldn't tell God Save the Queen from Pop Goes the Weasel if the people didn't get up and stand and take their hats off. But I was mad as the rest. Why, I gave her a little German silver vinaigrette I'd just bought for my wife. Hanged if I didn't. And I was only just married, you know. It's the peculiar twang of her voice, I suppose. And hearing all this, little Billy made up his mind that life had still something in store for him, since he would some day hear La Svengali. Anyhow, he wouldn't shoot himself till then. Thus the night wore itself away. The Prinzessin, Comtessin, and serene English Altessen, and other ladies of less exalted rank, departed home in cabs and carriages, and hostess and daughters went to bed. Late sitters of the ruder sex supped again, and smoked and chatted and listened to comic songs and recitations by celebrated actors. Noble dukes hobnobbed with low comedians. World-famous painters and sculptors sat at the feet of Hebrew capitalists and ageless millionaires. Judges, cabinet ministers, eminent physicians, and warriors and philosophers saw Sunday morning steal over Camden Hill and through the many windows of Michelin Lodge, and listened to the pipe of half-awakened birds, and smelt the freshness of the dark summer dawn. And as Taffy and the Laird walked home to the old hummus by daylight, they felt that last night was ages ago, and that since then they had foregathered with much there was of the best in London, and then they reflected that much there was of the best in London were still strangers to them, except by reputation, for there had not been time for many introductions, and this had made them feel a little out of it, and they found they hadn't had such a very good time after all, and there were no cabs, and they were tired, and their boots were tight. And the last they had seen of little Billy before leaving was a glimpse of their old friend in a corner of Lady Cornley's boudoir, gravely playing cup and ball with Fred Walker for sixpences, both so wrapped in the game that they were unconscious of anything else, and both playing so well with either hand that they might have been professional champions. And that saturnine young sawbones, Jake Talboys, now Sir Jakes, and one of the most genial of Her Majesty's physicians, who sometimes after supper and champagne was given to the thoughtful, sympathetic, and acute observations of his fellow man, remarked to the Laird in a whisper that was almost convivial, "Rather an enviable pair. Their united ages amount to 48 or so, their united weights to about 15 stone. And they couldn't carry you or me between them, but if you were to roll all the other brains that have been under this roof tonight into one, you wouldn't reach the sum of their united genius. I wonder which of the two is most unhappy." The season over, the songbirds flown, summer on the wane. His picture, The Moondial, sent to Moses Lyons, the picture dealer in Conduit Street, little Billy felt the time had come to go and see his mother and sister in Devonshire, and make the sun shine twice as brightly for them during a month or so, and the dew fall softer. So one fine August morning found him at the Great Western Station, the nicest station in all London, I think, except the stations that book you to France and far away. It always seemed so pleasant to be going west. Little Billy loved that station, and often went there for a mere stroll, to watch the people starting on their westward way, following the sun towards heaven knows what joys or sorrows, and envy them their sorrows or their joys, any sorrows or joys that were not merely physical, like a chocolate drop or a pretty tune, a bad smell or a toothache. And as he took a seat in the second-class carriage, it would be third in these democratic days, South Corner, Back to the Engine, with Silas Mariner and Darwin's Origin of the Species, which he was reading for the third time, and Punch, and other literature of a lighter kind to beguile him on his journey, he felt rather bitterly how happy he could be if the little spot, or knot, or blot, or clot which paralyzed the convolution of his brain, where he kept his affections, could but be conjured away. The dearest mother, the dearest sister in the world, in the dearest little seaside village, or town, that ever was, and other dear people, especially Alice, sweet Alice, with her hair so brown, his sister's friend, the simple, pure, and pious maiden of his boyish dreams, and himself, but for the wretched little killjoy cerebral occlusion, as sound, as healthy, as full of life and energy as he had ever been. And when he wasn't reading Silas Marner, or looking out the window at the flying landscape and watching it revolve around its middle distance, as it always seemed to do, he was sympathetically taking stock of his fellow passengers and mildly envying them, one after another, indiscriminately. A fat, old, wheezy Philistine with a bulbous nose and only one eye, who had a plain, sickly daughter, to whom he seemed devoted, body and soul. An old lady who still wept furtively at recollections of the parting with her grandchildren, which had taken place at the station. They had borne up wonderfully, as grandchildren do. A consumptive curate on the opposite corner seat by the window, whose tender, anxious wife, sitting by his side, seemed to have no thoughts in the whole world but for him, and her patient eyes were his stars of consolation, since he turned to look into them almost every minute, and always seemed a little the happier for doing so. There is no better star-gazing than that. So little Billy gave her up his corner seat, that the poor sufferer might have those stars where he could look into them comfortably without turning his head. Indeed, as was his wont with everybody, little Billy made himself useful and pleasant to his fellow travelers in many ways. So many that long before they had reached their respective journeys' ends, they had almost grown to love him as an old friend, and longed to know who this singularly attractive and brilliant youth, this genial, dainty, benevolent little princekin could possibly be, who was dressed so fashionably and yet went second class, and took such kind thoughts of others, and they wondered at the happiness that must be his at merely being alive, and told him more of their troubles in 6 hours than they had told many an old friend in a year. But he told them nothing about himself, that self he was so sick of, and left them to wonder. At his own journey's end, the farthest end of all, he found his mother and sister waiting for him in a beautiful little pony carriage, his last gift, and with them sweet Alice, and in her eyes for one brief moment that unconscious look of love surprise which is not to be forgotten for years and years and years, which can only be seen by the eyes that meet it, and which, for the time it lasts, just a flash, makes all women's eyes look exactly the same, I'm told. And it seemed to little Billy that, for the 20th part of a second, Alice had looked at him with Trilby's eyes, or his mother's, when that he was a little tiny boy. It all but gave him the thrill he thirsted for. Another 20th part of a second, perhaps, and his brain trouble would have melted away, and little Billy would have come into his own again, the kingdom of love. A beautiful human eye, any beautiful eye, a dog's, a deer's, a donkey's, an owl's even, to think of all that it can look, and all that it can see, all that it can even seem sometimes. What a prince among gems, what a star! But a beautiful eye that lets the broad white light of infinite space, so bewildering and garish and diffused, into one pure virgin heart, to be filtered there, and lets it out again, duly warmed, softened, concentrated, sublimated, focused to a point as in a precious stone, that it may shed itself, a love-laden effulgence, into some stray fellow heart close by, through pupil and iris, entre quartz yeux, the very elixir of life. Alas, that such a crown jewel should ever lose its luster and go blind. Not so blind or dim, however, but it can still see well enough to look before and after, and inward and upward, and drown itself in tears, and yet not die. And that's the dreadful pity of it. And this is a quite uncalled-for digression, and I can't think why I should have gone out of my way at considerable pains to invent it. In fact, of this 'ere song should I be axed the reason for the show. I don't exactly know, but all my family dwells upon Nancy. How pretty Alice has grown, mother. Quite lovely, I think, and so nice, but she was always as nice as she could be. So observed little Billy to his mother that evening, as they sat in the garden and watched the crescent moon sink to the Atlantic. Ah, my darling Willie, if you could only guess how happy you would make your poor old mammy by growing fond of Alice, and Blanche, too. What a joy for her! Good heavens, mother, Alice is not for the like of me. She's for some splendid young Devon squire, 6 foot high, and acred and whiskered within an inch of his life. Ah, my darling Willie, you are not of those who ask for love in vain. If you only knew how she believes in you, she almost beats your poor old mammy at that. And that night he dreamed of Alice, that he loved her as a sweet good woman should be loved, and knew, even in his dream, that it was but a dream. But oh, it was good, and he managed not to wake, and it was a night to be marked with a white stone, and, still in his dream, she had kissed him, and healed him of his brain trouble forever. But when he woke next morning, alas, his brain trouble was with him still, and he felt that no dream kiss would ever cure it, nothing but a real kiss from Alice's own pure lips. And he rose thinking of Alice, and dressed and breakfasted thinking of her, and how fair she was, and how innocent, and how well and carefully trained up, the way she should go, the beau ideal of a wife. Could she possibly care for a shrimp like himself? For in his love of outward form he could not understand that any woman who had eyes to see should ever quite condone the signs of physical weakness in man in favor of any mental gifts or graces whatsoever. End of Part 3, Part 5.